All right, excellent. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you may be joining us today. Today, we're going to be discussing how to build an AI-ready data strategy with our guests from Accenture and Credera. The pace of change right now in AI is absolutely staggering. And in the past few months, we've seen advancements that really would have felt almost like sci-fi a couple of years ago, from real-time reasoning systems, multi-agent collaboration, agentic AI. The stakes and opportunities for businesses are absolutely higher than ever. And at Tealium, we recently released our Future of Customer Data report, and it dives really deep into how organizations are adapting their strategies in an AI-driven world. And for me, the biggest takeaway that I see is that we continue to confirm that real-time, consented, and cloud scale data is no longer nice to have. It is absolutely foundational. So I am thrilled to be joined today by a couple of powerhouse voices in this space. Anthony with Accenture and Phil from Credera for really a real world conversation. So we can talk about what it really truly takes to build a scalable AI data ready foundation. So, Anthony, would you please introduce yourself?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hi. My name is Anthony Levesanos, based in London. I lead data and AI in Accenture Song. We are one of the largest creative digital agencies. We use data and AI to help brands grow by building stronger connections with their customers. That's why I'm excited also about today's kind of discussion. I've spent most of my career in marketing across retail, consumer goods, and life sciences.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today, Anthony. Phil, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Phil Lockhart. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Credera. It's a pleasure to be here today. So thank you for the opportunity. Been with Credera for 15 years. I'm out of Dallas, Texas, and Credera is a management consulting and technology enablement company. Specifically, we are that management consulting arm for Omnicom. So we get to work with some of the largest brands, making sure that we get to bring their visions to life. So as you can imagine, the use of AI and the use of data is heavy in all these visions that they're casting. So it's been a really fun time to be working in the space.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're going to be talking about this for quite a bit today. And I think as we work through this sort of framework here, it all starts with the foundation. And building that data foundation for AI success seems to be not only the best part to start with, but I think when we think in the elephant in the boardroom right now, AI is being discussed. And I know our CEO, and I know we hear this from others, are being told by the board, use AI to become more efficient, use AI to get new customers, find new ways to attract, retain, and grow your customer base leveraging this capability. But it's very broad and it has lots of different applications and implications. So I think with every exec talking about it, not enough have asked the hard questions about is our data actually ready to support AI? So when we think about this and before we go into those solutions, let's anchor ourselves because I think the problem is really very interesting when you think about what it takes to be AI ready. And the foundation has to be strong enough to be able to support what you're going to be able to do. So I think when we start this conversation, if I can ask each of you, how would each of you define kind of the true value of AI today, and where are you still seeing like the hype overshadowing the impact? And I'll kick it off with you, Phil.
Sure, no, this is great, and I think there's a lot of people struggling with this. But I think the promise of AI was never really about the headlines, and that's what people focus on right now. I think it's really about handling the hard stuff. That's where we see the value. Everyone like focuses on the futuristic demos, but really the frustrating realities are like the broken data, disconnected tools, and marketing that's really slower than your customer. That's where you can find the value. The real value of AI is in fixing like what's been broken for years. So we see all these things, we know what they are because we've been living them for a long time. So it's resolving those messy identities, scaling the content, without burning out your team and in the process because there's so much to create, and then making those decisions in milliseconds, not just and not in those meetings, that where all these things are happening today. So it's really turning that tedious, the time consuming, and the previous like things that were impossible, into the automation, those workflows that can actually perform. That's the power. That's the ROI. what the hype has been, this is what people still focus on, is everyone's looking at artificial general intelligence. They want to go like very futuristic on this. And the reality is like where we find value, it's giving marketers their time back, allow them to like reduce the waste and turning first party data into action. If you're not seeing value in the first 90 days, and it's really not transformation, it's just theater.
It's an interesting perspective. Anthony, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with all of that. And I think it's about helping brands understand and serve people in a better way, making experiences faster, easier. Um, the hype often focuses on big ideas, like right now, it's about fully autonomous agents. But at least for now, I think we have to recognize those concepts often fall short. They lack the context. The empathy is not there also. There's that human nuance that customers expect. What AI really delivers today is in supporting smarter decisions and more personalized interactions. People still in the loop though at the moment. I want to give you an example of a good one and a bad one as well. Applications. So you have EasyJet. They employ AI tools to create highly personalized travel itineraries, helping customers save time, discover trips that align to customers' preferences. That's a good example. I don't know if recently you've read the news. You have on the other side an overpromise, which was with Klarna, the fintech firm. It's about buy now, pay later, and they replaced 700 customer service employees with AI tools. But then very soon after, they found that the AI failed to meet the service quality expectations. Now the company is recruiting, rehiring these individuals back again. Okay, so that's two different contrasting examples.
That's interesting. And I think, whenever you look at things that you see, Anthony, when you think about data readiness, right, to be able to support that, and those examples you just mentioned, do you think the data readiness is the blocker to this type of success, or is it the AI tech?
Now, honestly, I think the bigger blocker right now, it's more than the AI tech, because most brands don't have clean, connected, consented data. AI can work well without that foundation. A lot of teams are still trying to sort out the basics. Basics still, I would say, the identity resolution, just getting the data out of their silos. Still, I think this is fundamental kind of challenges. At the same time, the AI tools and apps are moving faster than most companies and data strategies can keep up with. I think that's a challenge. The technology is moving faster. So the tech is there, but the data is not ready for it right now. Now, having said that, there's some good news as well. Achieving high value business kind of outcomes with AI doesn't require perfect data across the board. Yeah. Focusing on making specific, relevant data sets good enough for a few targeted use cases is often more effective than striving to have a comprehensive kind of data perfection across everything. So focus, I think, helps here on the data set.
That's very helpful. And I think whenever I look at, Phil, for example, when you think about a business rethinking their first party data and looking at, if AI is not just about a prediction, but it's about an action, what's sort of your take about how businesses are rethinking this first party strategy?
No, I think it's good. And like everything that Anthony mentioned, I think is spot on, within this. But I think just looking historically, a lot of companies have treat first party data like a raw asset, something to collect. They've just been collecting as much as possible and storing it. But in an AI powered world, it's a little different. It's not what you collect, it's actually what you connect with it. So, in the past, success has come from having the most data, but right now that's no longer true. It's really coming from having the right data, and you have to shape it, right? So it's usable and then actually available at the right time. So that means you still need to resolve these identities across the sources, but you need to enforce the consent in real time, right? You have all this data, but can you use it? And then actually structure it so go beyond just having it stored, so the behavioral data can actually fuel these models, not just the dashboards, right? That's how a lot of data has been historically used.
Yeah.
So if you want to like reposition it, we recommend that you think of first party data less like oil and more like embedded GPS functionality. And the reason why is that when the first party data is missing, AI doesn't stall. It keeps going actually, and it's just not where you want to go. So you have to make sure that you have it so you get to the right place.
Well, and I think back to what Anthony was saying about, you deploy something and 700 agents, 700 individuals are impacted and then they are going to be brought back in. To me, that underscores that the wrong data is being delivered to these systems or something just wasn't tuned the right way because you need that human element. And one of the things I think about is like when you look at companies, and I'll kind of ask you, Phil, first, when you see companies trying to navigate that tension between compliance, privacy, and the hunger to innovate, right? Everybody wants to be there. But when you look at the way a brand is having to deal with this, what are some of the things you see them navigate to get through that tension?
Yeah, I think a lot of things that AI can now do is like it's used for that compliance factor, right? I think people have realized that the use of all this data, the use of generative AI, it's really great and can do a lot of different things. But is it like still landing you where your brand wants to be represented? So the things that they're doing is they're providing more governance around that as they're using, generative AI to make either content or new imagery. They're being very firm on like how they're actually deploying this, making sure that they understand like, is this the right messaging? Is this the right tone? Are these the right colors that are being deployed within that? And we're seeing like these large global companies have actually having different levels of variation. When you think about the fact that there's multiple brands within these large global companies, there might be stringent rules at different levels. So what do they do is they have three different levels. One is just the overarching brand compliance that needs to be put into place. Then there's secondarily, it's like at each brand might have a little bit different level. Like let's be more strict on this one, less strict on this one because it's super luxury focused and everything needs to be exact. And the last part is making sure you have that local. So it's three levels of compliance on that to make sure it's there. So I think based on the things like Anthony was mentioning, spot on is that like they're learning that like you just can't count on this and that and everything's right. You need to start taking some governance and placing some rules for it.
That's excellent. Anthony, how do you see companies approaching this sort of triumvirate of being able to look at privacy, compliance, and AI innovation?
Yeah, I think we have to, if we look at the smarter companies, the ones that are doing that better, are not the ones treating privacy, compliance, and innovation as trade-offs. They design this to work together from the beginning. So it's like privacy by design, as we say also, with Accenture,
Mm.
across the AI workflow. So you set up the governance, the permissions, the data control from the start. It's not an afterthought. I think that's one of the key kind of principles. Um, at the same time, we have to be clear also. Compliance shouldn't stifle innovation. Regulation is important, but it should enable responsible progress and not block it. Um, so the companies, again, getting it right are the ones who use constraints. There are constraints in a creative way. They innovate within the envelope, the boundaries. They build trust with customers and still move fast by focusing on high quality consented data. Yeah. So trust and speed. The point is trust and speed can coexist if you are intentional from the beginning. And I think one of good examples recently has been also some good publicity around it is with Apple. They're enhancing, as we know, their AI capabilities, knows, what we know known as the Apple Intelligence. And while they have a very strong commitment to user privacy, Apple is using techniques like synthetic data, allowing for model training without collecting specific personal content. Yeah. So this is very different approach other similar companies have taken there, right? So privacy was very important for them.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is I did a lot of work with synthetic data sets to be able to look at application performance in my past, right? And you can put together sort of those robots to go into the Starbucks and order the lattes, right? But what happens when someone comes in and orders a mocha, right? The whole system doesn't know how to be prepared. So it's you have those ways to train things, and they are super, super sophisticated. And so one of the things I think about, Anthony, is like ambition versus actual readiness. Apple is at the forefront. But when you think about the patterns in industries and the stuff you mentioned about the customer call center issue, what are some of the things that you see in terms of those patterns across ambition, across industries when it comes to ambition versus actual readiness?
That's a good question. There's a significant gap. What I mean by that is the gap between AI ambition and readiness is real and is consistent across pretty much every industry. I work from life sciences to retail as well, right? So similar challenges. Almost every brand we speak, they have bold ambitions, but the reality on the ground is often messier. Leaders want to scale AI fast, but they are slowed down by fragmented data, legacy systems, unclear governance, and they don't know often where to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is a pattern, basically. The ambition is top down, and that's the challenge. The ambition is top down, board level excitement, big transformational goals, but the readiness is bottom up. And it's stuck in the day-to-day challenges of aligning data, teams, and tech. The companies making real progress are the ones being honest about where they are, starting small with high impact use cases and building foundations that scale, not just going for what is flashy and what makes the news today. As I said, I'm doing a lot in retail, and give you another example. Was also public recently in the news from the US. If you look at the retail, Sam's Club is a Walmart-owned kind of retailer. They announced plans to eliminate traditional checkout lanes by implementing scan and go system. To do that, of course, you need to have an AI component, and that one is the one that verifies the purchase as customers leave, removing the need to have a door receipt checks, basically, right? Now, to do that, the success of this is spending heavily on the quality and the integration of the data systems, basically. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And so whenever you think about that, right, what you were saying with the ambition being top down, how does Accenture help a client move from experimentation and ambition to value with AI? What's sort of that workflow you take them through to help them realize this?
Yes, that's another good question. So I think we do that in a few different ways. First of all, we have invested heavily in AI capabilities. To be specific, 3 billion we invested. We have established 27 Gen AI studios globally. These studios serve as innovation hubs. Their clients can cooperate, co-create AI solutions. They can test prototypes, develop strategies for implementation, basically. The other one we've done also, we have created tailored specific AI apps that addresses industry-specific things. For instance, we worked a lot with BMW to develop a Gen AI platform that accelerates decision-making, turning enterprise data into real-time insights in minutes. Yeah, real-time, as you said earlier on, the importance of it in minutes. Also, I think partnership, the ecosystem is super important for us, but everybody, I think, in this space. What I mean by that is we have recently expanded our partnership with NVIDIA. We have now a new NVIDIA business group to help enterprises rapidly scale their AI adoption. So that group is using our AI refinery, which leverages the full NVIDIA AI stack to advance areas such as process reinvention, AI-powered simulation, and AI also sovereign AI as well. So we have trained, as a result of that, we have trained 30,000 of our people on the use of NVIDIA's technology to help their customers deploy in a successful way. Okay. The other area, also we've done quite a bit, is we're committed on responsible AI deployment as well across everything we do. So we have our responsible AI framework that underpins everything. And I think the other one worth also mentioning, we have invested not only on technology, but also in our people talent as well. We have upskilled our workforce as well at the same time.
Very interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to going deeper into that. And, I think, Phil, before we jump into that, whenever I think about what your clients are seeing, where do you see clients getting the biggest returns today on this, basic foundation and getting everything prepared?
Sure. Yeah. I think like the biggest areas is specifically, it's something I've touched on before, but it's like where AI is solving problems that have been slowing teams down for years. It's less on the futuristic stuff. We're really talking about the fundamental things and where we can provide that value. So, top returns are coming from probably three different areas. So content operations, it's taking the manual friction out of the process. So what are we seeing? Auto-generating briefs. Why is that important? Is that, well, when people see things in, maybe in social media, they can respond faster. They can not only get the brief created, but they actually can start with the concepting, the storyboarding, and the image generation to get things going. The second piece is flagging issues before production. So within the tools that people are actually making the content within it, it can actually see things where brand compliance isn't in place, or actually looking at elements that say, hey, that call to action is not going to perform well before it actually gets deployed out. And the last thing is speeding up approvals. We've looked through like a lot of these content creation processes, and there's multiple approval steps, which is good, right? But we'll see moments where there's 98% approval. So we're taking a moment and taking a time out on that. The great thing is you can use AI to look at it and say, within the step, the things that are common about that 98% are these, and these are the outliers. And then we just focus and showcase the steps that actually have those outliers within it. So content operations is one. And then personalization at scale. That's what everyone's talking about, right? So instead of marketing teams, manually creating the 50 versions of an ad campaign, AI is generating the content variants. It's based on the real-time behavior and product data that's within there. We're seeing, more use on the actual content on it. There are aspects of imagery that's being more heavily used. People typically start out with just changing out the backgrounds of it, making some additional changes, adding some elements of maybe some objects that resonate with the user, but making sure that this doesn't sacrifice the brand standards that they have, within it. And the last part is decisioning. So making sure that decision is embedded. So they're integrating the AI directly into marketing workflows, and it's there to make sure that they're triggering the next best message, looking specifically like at offers as well. So like that's very heavy in like the QSR, the restaurant environment, and it's based on what's happening in the moment, not just like what's happened on last week's dashboard. So the great thing is that these things are no longer science projects. They're actually delivering real ROI in like we said, 90 days. That's the bar we set at Credera. It's like you have to get it within 90 days because a lot of these projects are quite expensive to bring in AI. So you got to make sure that you're setting this up and having that mindfulness. And if AI isn't accelerating speed to market or reducing cost per conversion now, I think it's probably more just a strategy, more than just like strategy. It's actually shelfware, right? We see a lot of people build things and they never actually get put into production or utilized.
And that's something we've run across around the world is people will start to go into the mode of, okay, now I've built it, and then the questions come from either the legal teams or the compliance teams or someone going, well, what did you train this on? Where did you get the data to do this? How are you going to roll it out? Do you have all of the authorization to do this? And then it doesn't ever see the light of day. So I think one of the big areas we'll shift into is kind of talking about data readiness, because I think one of the things I had written down was, it's not what you collect, but what you connect. And I think that without clean, connected, compliant data, this is all going to fall apart before you really get started. And so whenever I think about data readiness, it always matters, but what does it actually mean is kind of what we look at. And so when I think about entering the phase where AI isn't just reacting to what happened yesterday, it's like what you were both just saying. It's acting on what's happening now. And in order to do that, you've got to have information, the data that is not only clean, but it is connected between those systems and it's continuously flowing. So it is a continual, pipeline. And I think that those things to me we see in every industry as being relative, right? Because continuously flowing is relative depending on what the brand is doing and how the consumer interacts with the brand. And so whenever I think about that, Anthony, I'll ask kind of the first question is, when you think about your perspective and what you see across those different companies you mentioned, do you feel like the tech stack or do you feel like the data layer holds most company back, on being able to deliver this? And is readiness the problem, or is it more the AI capability or just the tech infrastructure?
Yeah, no, I'll explain. Yes, absolutely. I think data readiness is often the primary hurdle in realizing the AI potential. Also, there are studies, different studies to back up that as well. Basically, 15 to 20% of organizations report their data is of sufficient quality and accessible to AI applications, right? Only 15 to 20% of the data set. So that's why the role of the modern integrated stack is quite important as well. So what we mean by a modern integrated tech stack, I think a few principles there. You need a unified data platform. These platforms consolidate data from various data sources, ensuring consistency and accessibility. You need also advanced data processing tools that can handle large-scale data processing, cleansing, transformations is equally important, right? Robust data governance needs to be embedded to the system and architecture, scalable infrastructure, integrated AI and ML ops opportunities. This should come together as well, right? So that's the modern tech stack requirements now in a nutshell.
Excellent, excellent. And Phil, whenever you think about flexibility in data collection and orchestration, whenever you think about a multi-cloud, multi-platform world and some of these brands that have multiple brands underneath them, it's a fascinating thing to think about. So what does that flexibility mean for you when you're looking at advising a client on this?
Yeah, flexibility is really important. There's like three pillars that we look at, like within an AI architecture. One is a strong data foundation. Two is that flexibility, and three is that like, are you embedding that AI functionality? So we talk about flexibility. It isn't a luxury anymore. It's really survival. And why? Things are moving so fast. And why is it a luxury and why are things moving so fast is that because the data you need, which we were saying is like the fuel for this, it's always changing. There's new consent laws. There's the new platforms actually generating new content and new customer behaviors that you're analyzing. So if your architecture is rigid, your AI models are learning from yesterday's reality, right? It's no longer today, and they're probably actually generating tomorrow's mistakes, and that you're going to have to respond to. So, are you monitoring that? So, from a flexibility standpoint, for an example, is like if we're helping our clients build custom solutions within this during the time frame that we're building it, what they're going to see is that they're going to see new models come out. Or they're going to be like, oh, can we switch to this model? Or the fact that like we've looked at this and this model does not perform as well as another one. Are you able to switch that out? So the flexibility, not only just like with the data, but then also with the models that you're using is going to be completely imperative on that. So we work with clients to build data layers that are going to adapt, right? So when that business logic changes and the regulations shift, or even if your MarTech stack evolves, your data needs to stay useful and your AI needs to keep learning. So just like in totality, really, like rigid systems train broken models, right? Flexible ones are going to be the ones that are going to fuel the true performance.
Well, and I think whenever you talk about that, then it makes me think about governance, right? And like, what role for you does real-time data governance play when trying to unlock personalization and automation in a flexible world?
Yeah. So I'd say like the governance is going to be imperative, and like you're looking at this really from privacy and a compliance, standpoint, right? And a lot of people, believe that privacy and compliance, are going to become innovation blockers within this. And really, we see that privacy and compliance only become innovation blockers when they're treated as afterthoughts. They have to be part of the system. Anthony mentioned this, at the beginning. It's important because when we see the smartest companies are actually building this into their processes and their systems from the start. Where that's the data design, the model governance, and into activation rules, right? So when privacy is wired into the architecture and just not slapped on later, which is what a lot of companies do, it actually accelerates the innovation. And how so? It reduces risk. It speeds up approvals and minimizes the rework. So there's three things that I think compliant by design frameworks need within this. So consent-aware data flows, right? We've touched on this before, but those are the things that power the personalization. You need that's a requirement on it. You also need to have audit trails built into the AI decisioning. The great thing is that there are patterns for this, and it needs to be established at the forefront. And the last thing is that guardrails that let marketers experiment. You have to do that without letting them cross the line within that. So making the framework on that. So this is how we can make sure that you have that governance, you have that compliance, but you're also not stymieing innovation at the same time.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take. And Anthony, do you concur with that type of approach? What sort of ways does Accenture look at that with
Totally. I
government?
think flexibility is a key word here. And I have a slightly also different definition, the flexibility here. I'll explain. But real-time data for sure plays a role in making AI relevant. Is not though always essential or the same important as across the board. So what I mean by that is it's critical for certain use cases and industries. So if you take banking, like fraud detection, definitely real time. Personalization, as Phil said, for marketing, for engagement, definitely, is important. Logistic as well. So anything where timing directly affects outcomes, yes. But there are other applications near real time also, or batch outcome is also sufficient. I think what really matters is the quality, structure, and accessibility of the data. Um, and then governance, on the other hand, is non-negotiable, needs to be there. So it's foundational for AI viability across every industry. Without clear governance, as we've said, consent, access controls, transparency, guardrails, as Phil said, you can't scale AI in a responsible manner.
That's very, very helpful because I think when we look at, how you guys are both advising clients and protecting trust while still, you got to protect your customer trust while still enabling that innovation at scale. It's very critical you lay that solid, foundation for this to be
Right.
able to say, here's what we're going to do and here's how we can do it. But I think the biggest thing I'm taking away from this is having an understanding of really the ultimate purpose, right? And I like the audit trails, the guardrails, the consent aware data flow. Those things all have very profound impacts on the way you shape this. And so whenever you talk about flexibility in the role of like fraud detection, like you were just talking about, when I think about what I see many of our customers, they want to get started on this. And since we've kind of covered the strategy, if we now shift to sort of making it real and talking about that, I think just getting started with AI can be very overwhelming. And I think as Phil, as you had mentioned, getting those pieces that are meaningful that you can take and you can start to help the customer innovate, I think those things help out tremendously. And so to me, I see the key is really to move with purpose and start with those clear business objectives with the strong foundation and a roadmap that gives you clarity on where you're going to go. And so, Anthony, I guess when I look at this first, how do you first give advice when a client comes to you and says, we're just starting on this journey? Where should we begin? Based on all the stuff we've talked about, what is the way you start to talk them through this?
Yeah, I think that the anchor to all of this is having a clear business problem that you want to get behind and solve, improve it. But you need to think big from day one. The more advanced companies they begin by identifying a high impact use case where AI can drive real value. It could be something which is costly, inefficient, or customer critical, right? Customer service, for example. Then they work backwards. So what data do we actually need to make that use case work, right? Not the other way around. Often I've seen, companies getting confused. Oh, what data do I need, etc. Starting with a client problem, with a problem you're trying to solve, basically. And as we said earlier on, it's not so much you don't need perfect data across the board, just the right data, well governed and connected. Now, while starting small helps you prove value fast, I think I want to make the distinction here. We're past the point of wait and see with AI, right? The value is
Mhm.
clear, and companies that move faster at scale are pulling ahead. So it's about parallel tracks. Two things happen at the same time. So prove it quickly with a flagship use case, but also lay down the foundation at the same time. Data governance platforms, talent that lets you scale fast when it works, basically. Yeah. And I don't know if again, it was the news recently in the UK, BA, British Airways, they used AI to solve operational kind of challenges like real-time weather rerouting, smarter gate allocation. At the same time, though, they invested in digital tools, talent, and governance. Yeah. Now that pays off basically, right? So they had two parallel tracks, as I said. 90% of the flights they reported recently, they're departing on time. And actually, two-thirds of all the airline Heathrow departures, they left ahead of time right? So it's a big milestone for them, and a proof that having two parallel tracks running is paying off.
That's amazing. I mean, those are great examples because they help humanize it, right? They make it something that's, kind of tangible as you look at the way you can talk people through this. Phil, whenever you think about the signals that you look for when you know some sort of AI initiative is going to create measurable impact, where do you look first? What signals do you see from the brand to be able to start that process and walk them through how to get on this journey?
Yeah, measurement and ROI is a huge focus, right? So like, as you put it in place, how do you make sure you know it's working? So if AI is really scaling, leaders should see probably three clear signals. And the good thing is like it's in two areas, right? Effectiveness or
Hmm.
efficiency on it. So the first thing you're going to see is that in some capacity, cycle times are shrinking. So you can measure that, right? So your campaigns, content, and decision loops should be moving faster. And why? It's because AI is doing that heavy lifting that used to take like a lot of time within it. So the approvals, the personalization, and performance optimization is actually taking place. So that's one area that we're looking for, the measurement of time and efficiency on that. Secondly, you know that it's working when decision is actually embedded in the process and it's not delayed. It's not some other system that is, being accessed to be put in there. So when it's not just surfacing insight, but it's actually taking action right in the moment. Now let's go take this, let's go process it, let's go bring it back. Whether it's triggering the next best offer that we talked about, oftentimes it could be adjusting spend dynamically, like with advertisements or even pricing of products, within different solutions. Or I guess, suppressing a message based on real-time behavior. It's saving costs on there. That intelligence is actually built into the system. It's not waiting for a weekly meeting where Joe is going to make the decision, on that. So there's all these processes, things that are in campaigns, but just real-time decision of like the operations of the business. And I think the last time is that you can notice that your teams are actually shifting from doing to directing. So the marketers aren't actually buried in the execution. They're starting to guide the models. Like this is where their time is taking place. They're starting to shape the strategy in ways they could never even think about before because now they have time. And they're actually
Yeah.
investing in creativity, so they're expanding the content in some way. So AI is really taking the grunt work off their plates so they can focus on value, not volume. So it's no longer questions of volume on that. You actually get to see them focusing and bringing back questions on that. So we tell clients that AI can't just be smart. It has to be operational. It has to be built in the fabric of the company. So if you're not seeing faster outcomes, smarter actions, or more empowered teams, your AI isn't scaling. It's just probably spinning and costing you money.
Yeah, and I think some of the early wins you talked about to me were pretty fascinating about the content generation, the personalization at scale, and starting with things that are not necessarily overly complicated, but just the areas where you can get those early wins. What would you say can others that are on this webinar learn from those early wins that could be good advice for them?
Yeah. So, I think like the big thing is you have to be building foundational elements within this. So like the whole idea of getting quick wins is making sure that you're not trying to jump to this next level of maturity because that takes time on it. So it's like you're focusing on saying like, what can I deliver and what do I have confidence on this? Anytime you're jumping to AI, your company's watching, right? Does it
Mhm.
actually work? Is it providing the value? And if you pick the wrong use cases just because they look cool, what's going to happen is that those funds and that budget is probably going to be turned off and for good reason, within it. So I think what you want to do is you want to look for activities from like an efficiency standpoint that have lots of volume. Things that take place like a continuous amount of time. So it's like you can apply AI there to shrink that down within that. So those are the elements from the efficiency.
Mhm.
Effectiveness, you would look at things such as like ad performance, right? Like if you have a large budget within advertisement on that, that's an area where you can make a big impact, right? You make a 1% change on that. If have $100 million, investment in there, then like all of a sudden that's $1 million. Or even just like for the fact like this, the comparably like any amount of spend that you're doing that is some cost to the budget. It doesn't have to be $100 million. It could be $25,000. That just makes a very true and measurable impact, making sure you're looking for those use cases versus just the whiz bang neat thing that's out there.
That's awesome. I mean, I think at the end of the day, whenever I think about all of the things we're doing, we're racing very fast in this direction. And I think we've entered a new chapter, right? Of just where AI is going and that what you're both describing is these systems aren't really just predicting outcomes or taking action, which is a good transition into kind of the final section here of agentic AI, right? Going to different conferences and different things, agentic AI, it seems like autonomous agents that not only can reason, respond, and drive decisions across systems, they're not just enhancing those workflows, they're actually starting to own them. And I think that what I find very interesting about that, as we think about framing the conversation last week or a couple weeks ago, we were in Sydney, Australia, and we were going through our Digital Velocity event. Our CEO, Jeff Lunsford, brought up the famous quote from Neuromancer, from the author William Gibson, that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And the fact that these capabilities are no longer just theoretical, they're actually being piloted across industries. We see this is something that is really taking this to the next level. And the differentiator seems to be that how well you can execute on the foundation we were just talking about in your data strategy. It seems like you're going to have to be able to support these systems consistently, ethically, and at scale going forward. So whenever I think about the future and where we are headed, how do each of you look at agentic AI? I mean, what does it do and how does it reframe the technical requirements for enterprise readiness from what we were just talking about?
So I think, with that, like agentic AI is that it's moving from just something that you're forcing to do. It actually has initiative or the agency to actually do things, right? It's on its own behalf. So it's moving from something that you're forcing to go do or you're triggering to it's always running. So there's a lot of benefits from that because it's 24/7 on that aspect of the processing. So it's going to provide a lot of value if you can focus it within the right area. The problem is that oftentimes the guardrails are very wide on agentic solutions, and it gets off track. And when it gets off track, guess what? 24/7, it's off track and it's doing things that you don't intend it to do. So I think one of the benefits is that if you can actually identify a very clear lane and a very clear focus for this, you can accomplish the task. When you look at that, you can build multiple agents that can work together to each solve those different tasks. And then you can have another agent on top of it that is making sure it directs and compounds all these things together. So it can provide an incredible amount of value, but the value is only unlocked based on like the tools and the data that you provide for it.
Okay, makes sense. Anthony, how do you describe agentic AI?
I'm behind all of that. Just to add, I think in terms of the definition for now, at least, it is a system that can reason, decide, and the key words here is enact with a minimal human supervision input, right? So that raises the bar for readiness in a big way. So it's not just about clean data anymore, right? It's about connected system. Now, the real time we talked about earlier on, now in this case, it is very important also. The real time orchestration also of your data, the embedded governance, the human oversight also working together. I think this is quite important. So AI readiness now is evolving from can we run a model to can we trust this system, this agent to act on our behalf at scale. I think that trust element is quite important. So I see three major shifts, at least for now. So meaning the architecture needs to become more modular and event driven, yeah? Different events and interventions you want to do. So agents can plug in, collaborate, and they respond dynamically within the right context. And context is quite important here. That's why the real time also is important. That means also that governance gets more embedded. So real-time policy checks, the guardrails that we talked about, real-time checks, audit trails, explainability is super important at the same time here, real time. You cannot afford to go wrong when you are out there, in 24 hours across all your customers. But also your org model design needs to involve. We're talking about more fusion teams with different skills, language skills. It's not just, the traditional data science kind of people, right? Language is super important here. Fewer handoffs we're going to see probably between individuals, employees, and the machines, if they are really capable, the agents, yeah? And I think we have to rethink roles and the trust between humans and machines. So the stakes for sure are going to get higher when and if AI really acts in an autonomous, real autonomous way. So readiness now would mean being able to deploy agents with confidence, not just doing another coding exercise. So confidence and trust is going to be quite important.
Yeah, well, you're talking about, not just building for autonomy, or you have to kind of build for autonomy, not just intelligence, because the way you're describing this is you've got to take in the ethical considerations, the modularity of it, and the consent and privacy obligations. So there's a lot that has to take place behind the scenes for an agentic future to exist, because otherwise it can be a complete disaster for any system that's making a decision and taking action. And so whenever I think about real time, and Phil, kind of back to you, whenever you look at context and contextual data flows to keep agents continuously like well informed and aligned, how do you see agentic keeping that alignment to customer expectations?
Sure. Yeah, I think like within that, and you talk about data, agentic AI doesn't just need more data, it needs smarter data, right? It needs to have access to it, and that means that you have to design some strategies where intelligence is current. There's context to it, not just raw data, and as everyone's talked about, it has to be governed from the start. So there's like three principles that are really important in there. So the first one is that context rich, not context blind. So this is like the data readiness, the strong foundation that needs to be there. You need to look very closely at your data flows and bring in that real-time behavioral signals. Has to have that environmental contextual information added to that, as well as that consent status. Just because you're collecting the data does not mean that you can use the data. So that it's required so these AI agents can make those decisions that are relevant and situational. That's really important, right? Not generic or outdated, because making decisions all the time. If you give an example, like with Tealium, they play a critical role in this here. You're streaming that event level data, and it has the consent controls baked in. So these decisions are both immediate and compliant. The second piece is ethics by design, right? You need to have that in there. So embed that governance directly into the architecture. So how do you do it within the architecture? It requires role-based access. And you also need to design traceability in these models, and clear escalation points when it breaks out of that system. Do you have people within there that can have that human oversight to redirect? So these are things that have to be done in the forefront, because you're not going to be able to catch them on the fly as these things are being done so heavily. And the last thing is that continuous calibration, right? These systems can't be set and forget. There's drift in these models, and this happens all the time. So like people will get a model set up and they'll go, hey, we're ready, but they don't have that continuous calibration in there. So that needs to be set up at the beginning. So we help clients build the feedback loops and monitor outcomes. They need to flag anomalies and adapt the models so AI gets more responsible over time. So agentic AI will only scale if it's trusted. We've talked about that. And trust starts with data that's not just accurate, but it's accountable within that. So that's really big.
No, that's very, very helpful. And it's kind of the future proofing piece, right? Of how to
That's
build
right.
this and grow. And, Anthony, with kind of your
Yeah,
experience, does future proofing align in this context?
I think yes, and I think to add to what Bill said also, I think he mentioned about connected architecture, data
Mhm.
trust, right? I think the wants to add is also it's about design. So event-driven designs also is going to be it's very important. So we need to guide the shift from static customer profiles, for example, to dynamic events streams. So behaviors, purchases, signals. So agentic systems respond in context. Yeah. So that's one thing. And the other thing also is important is you design experience, new experience for agents. So usually we need to help also business define how agents should behave, when to act, when to escalate, how to communicate. So they don't just automate tasks, but they enhance the whole customer experience in a human kind of aligned way. Yeah. So it's a mindset shift from data as an asset to data as an agent enabler, basically. Yeah. Um, Shall I carry on your future-proofing kind of question also?
Sure, if you want to.
Yeah. So future-proofing, yeah, it used to be the meaning was around picking the right tech. Now it's about designing for change and resilience. Um, And in my experience, also that means helping clients build for flexibility, right? And we talked about that. Now, Yes, composable architecture is quite important. You need to have the right setup, not monolithic kind of system, so you can plug in the new AI tools that every day there are more and more coming out there, right? You need to be consumer centric. We always design with the end customer in mind, in order to design the right data strategies, the journeys. And I think we talked also about, Phil mentioned about resilience also by design. So the last one I want to mention here is creativity as a differentiator, right? Now, if you think about it for a minute, and maybe most important of all, I think it's the creativity part. So as agentic AI and any advanced tech here becomes ubiquitous, and it's going to be commodity, right? Creativity, how we solve problems, design, communicate, connect, that will be the true differentiator. So the tech might be the same across the board, but what you do with it, that's where future proofing really happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really when we look at future proofing just in general, it's been a long-standing challenge. I think every organization wants to build, but when we think about like what future proofing meant 10 years ago versus today, it's completely different. I remember unlocking, services-based architecture, with RESTful services, and that was the future. And being able to have a composable set of assets to move data between those was the future. So I think we really are at a shift right now in enterprise AI, and the agentic AI is definitely on the forefront, but we've gone from AI that predicts to now AI that decides and acts. And I think some of those things are just unbelievably phenomenal to me to think about where we're going. So huge first thank you to both you for being able to join this session today, but the insights that you've shared, because I think my biggest takeaway is that, to be clear, AI is no longer on the horizon. It's here. And the gap between experimentation and enterprise value is being measured in months, not years. I encourage everybody that's on this webinar to read our Future of Customer Data report. It goes into a lot more detail, but it talks about our perspective at Tealium and what we've seen by interviewing many of our existing customers. We see 72% of the business leaders tell us that basically they believe the real-time customer data is going to be critical to AI success, much like you both have mentioned. But less than 30% of the respondents say they're actually confident their data infrastructure is even remotely ready. So the delta is there, and we can leverage your expertise and our technology to be able to close that gap. And I think what's a good takeaway for me is that organizations that are going to win in this next phase, whether in personalization, automation, or agentic AI, won't just have the best models. They'll have the cleanest, most connected, most compliant data flowing through these systems at every moment, and especially in the moments that matter. So I think for me, the question for everybody on this isn't if you'll need to modernize your data strategy. I think it's how fast you're going to be able to do it. So thank you again for being part of today's discussion, and let's all keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Take care.
Right.